very quickly introduce disease. Where should I put this? Okay. So, Parkinsonism is it comes from the degeneration, progressive degeneration in the basal ganglia, which leads to lots of different motor symptoms. The ones that are in focus now are the gait disorder kind of symptoms. So this is where the quality of life decreases when patients experience this drop in velocity, stride length. This is how typically when it's developed, the disease is developed, that's how you see the patient, that's what they look like. There's also, when it's more advanced, freezing, fascination. Fascination is when they make lots of small steps. And for the gait symptoms, the therapies using dopamine replacement approaches do not work very well. So we're searching for something that will help them walk a little better. Just to characterize the disease a little better, give you something that you might be more familiar with. The rigidity is very interesting. This is an old figure I found from, well, it's not old, but yeah. Van Emmerik. The rigidity is interesting. Patients become overly coordinated. So here what you see in the black curve, the black part is patients' relative phase, the standard deviation of the relative phase between pelvis and thorax. So when they walk, they maintain a very consistent relative phase in comparison to the healthy. So you change the velocity and you experience this flexibility. So this is the black curve, more relative phase, and more variability in the relative phase. And also this is the actual relative phase which changes. So this is, I think, important. Not usually, that's not how usually disease is introduced, but this, you see that there are some dynamical relations that are important. So, the typical strategy for an assistive device being used for some time already is cueing. You give a metronome to the patients, and they tend to walk a little faster, make stride lengths that are increased a little bit. And we want to start from here and just go beyond, have something a little better for an assistive device. What do we know about gait that could help us optimize the cueing? Well, let's say we start with the basics. When you're walking, this is very unstable kind of thing that puts you in a situation where you can fall at any moment. So you have to be very careful where you put your variability. On the other side, we know that we cannot just remove variability. That's something important that you should not try to over-control. So from these two, let's decide that we want to focus on the way gait varies. So this is our lead into what we should be trying to change in the cueing. In particular, we're going to look at the way gait varies in time. Now here, I introduce you how gait interstride intervals have this long-range correlation, but because you're very familiar, I'm going to go over this very quickly. So from step to step, you see these correlations. You can predict, or you have some tendency, you can expect where things will go relative to where they were before. And the relationship goes all across in the future when you are in the long-range correlated regime. And these alphas is how we characterize the correlations, whether we tend to go up and down, or there's no relation whatsoever, or you have a persistent relation. And when alpha is greater than 1, then it's kind of a different sort of thing. So I hope you're familiar with long-range correlations, because that's what we're going to measure. That's what we're going to put, and that's what we're going to measure using our standard tool. Now, next thing, again, trying to come from theory is I told you already, you probably should have seen this. We have seen that gait, interstride intervals, tend to be long-range correlated in the healthy. So you exhibit persistence. And you might ask, well, why is that good? I would not say that it's always good. So some people tend to assume that 1 over f, pink noise, long-range correlation. So these are the same things is always a good thing. But if you, for example, if you look into the research of Carl Newell, is he here? He has shown in many cases it's not so clear. It kind of depends on what the task is, what the constraints are. So some people are nodding their heads. So let's still ask why is long-range correlations good in the case of gait, but not just assume it, but see why is that the case. I think I'll try to derive this from something more recent. It's a computational model of a passive walker, which itself is a mechanical model of gait. So you have this very simplified system that just uses gravity to make steps down a certain slope. And when you change certain parameters, which I'm not going to go into, you can see the paper. You change orbital stability. From changing the orbital stability, you increase the alpha. So this is what the authors tell us. So they link, and that's the important part, they link stability with long-range correlation. So basically you have to start from here. If you start from here, you see more stability into this very reduced model of gait. You see the increase in stability, you see the increase in the long-range correlations. So if you listen to these guys and their modeling of gait, you expect the better, you go even beyond pink noise. So now I have to put another constraint here to tell you why more than alpha, well, if alpha goes beyond 1, why is that not a good thing? Well, for this, I don't actually have good theory for, but my reasoning is like that. When your alpha goes beyond 1, this is a non-stationary process. And if these are my interstride intervals and they're non-stationary in the mean, this basically means that I'm no longer obeying the pendulum dynamic that you would expect in a healthy human walker. Okay, so there are different models of gait that all involve some sort of pendulum. It's inverted or it's suspended here or it's suspended somewhere up there. But they all lead to the conclusion that you have some sort of pendulum dynamic, which implies that you need to have a stable mean, because that's what a pendulum has. It has an intrinsic frequency, an eigenfrequency. So if you're here, if you're in this regime, then this means something is going wrong. I cannot tell you what, but based on this reasoning, it's not right. So when you put the two together, you come up with this double constraint, which tells you that alpha is the optimal for the interstride intervals. And this is related to what we see in patients. So patients are closer to here, and healthy walkers tend to be closer to here. Patients are more white, and healthy are more pink. So what we want to do from here is to make patients more pink as well. Completely going against what Paula just told us, we're just going to strap them into reproducing what we think is the proper pattern, because that's all we could think of so far. So how do we do that? So there's a general finding that constraining, it's from many papers, constraining some sort of variable but quasi-periodic behavior draws the intervals from pink to white. and even anti-persistence if you ask them to synchronize, for example, in tapping. And from there, if we use the typical cueing strategy, which is always an isochronous metronome, we expect that PD patients become also even worse. So if they're here, closer to white, and you give them the isochronous metronome, they should become even whiter. So we want to deliver the cueing because we know it works, but we want to avoid the cueing becoming a problem at the level of the long-range correlations, the alphas. And we know there's lots of studies, well, I don't know if there are lots, there are many studies people have tried before, even in this room, people who have just done the simple thing. Let's ask you to behave with something that's pink at the interbeat or interstride or whatever intervals, and the participant tends to reproduce the same sort of correlation structure. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to give patients a metronome that's not isochronous but has pink noise variability. In our study, they walk, we look at their interstride intervals, we deliver a cueing stimulus, so that's auditory signal that it's either a metronome, music, or something else that I'll explain in a moment, and see what happens. We manipulate variability, so we have three conditions: no variability, white, or pink. In addition to that, I'm not going to talk too much about how we manipulate the music. It could be the music, which we worked a lot to put exactly the right kind of variability into the interbeat intervals, and amplitude modulated noise, which is something that is like the music, but it's not, it doesn't sound good, it's just noise. So it has rhythm, but doesn't have the other good things about music. Importantly, we always use a plus 10%. This is the typical strategy. You give to the patients plus 10% of the tempo that they produced in pretest. And what do we find? At the level of the typical parameters, cadence, so that's their tempo. I always give you the pretest just as a reference. There are no differences. These are the PD patients. On the right side, the controls. This increase is expected, okay? But nothing happens here among the different conditions. And something might be going for the controls, but that's not important. At the level of stride length, it's also the same story. Well, actually, it's not the same story. We didn't even reproduce the typical finding. You should get an increase here, because that's what cueing is supposed to be doing. But we didn't get this. And there are no differences among the different conditions. Obviously, the controls have longer stride length than the patients. And the thing that the place where we find differences, expectedly, because that's where we put them, is in the alphas of the interstride intervals. So as you go from pink to white noise to no variability in the cueing, in the stimulus, you drop down. It's sort of similar pattern with the controls. Interestingly, there are no differences among the patients and the controls. Although I can explain why that's not so amazing. Now, let's go a little deeper. We want to see, there's an important thing about our study. We did not ask the patients to synchronize. And we want to see how synchronization affects all these measures and other measures. So we're going to look into the synchronization between steps and beats using the vector length. So you do circular statistics to get a distribution of relative phases, and the vector length tells you how consistent the synchronization. This is just a measure of synchronization. Here, for this case, you have very good match, and so you get large vector length. And here, not. So you have a short vector length. And what we find is that first patients tend to synchronize more than the controls. And again, there are no differences among the different conditions. So there's only a group effect here. So this thing, however, the fact that they synchronize more is kind of interesting for us, and it's important because we have to think about when we go to the clinicians and tell them, should I instruct the patient to synchronize on purpose, or should I tell them to not synchronize? And if you tell them to synchronize, then it becomes kind of a difficult thing for them to go outside, and if this is going to be a rehabilitation strategy used in the long term, if you ask them to always listen to the speaker, to the headphones, it becomes an extra load. But the fact that they tend to synchronize more gives us a clue that they might use this whether they're instructed or not. Even deeper than that, however, we want to look into how this tendency to synchronize is related to the alphas. So for this, I show you the correlations between the vector length. So it's transformed, but this is still synchronization. On the left side, you have more synchronization. Okay? So these guys synchronize more. These guys do not synchronize at all. And here, in all cases, you have on the y-axis the alphas. So the more they synchronize, the more their alphas drop. So this is when they synchronize with stimulus that has no variability. For the white, it's similar, but it's less. So a little lower exponents, coefficients, I'm sorry. And for the pink, the interesting part is that there's no correlation. And this is the kind of the good thing that we think we found. That here, basically, what's the implications of this? And this is the end of the study here. If I give to the patients a cue, and I tell them you have to synchronize, we know that there's some benefit, but they also suffer here. They lose the long-range correlation because the more they synchronize, the more they drop. So if I want to avoid this, I have to use pink. And here the interesting part is it doesn't matter if they synchronize or not. Their alphas do not are not dependent on how much they synchronize. Okay? And I'll skip the second study just to tell you this is lots of partners, but it's mostly the hospital and Montpellier, University of Montpellier that did this project. Thank you.